Hello, today I'm gonna try my hand at doing some little miniature spice bottles with real spices in them. So I've done salt and pepper before on my channel, but this is just a little bit different. So you can see here the tiny little labels I printed. So the last time I did this, I used pipettes. This time I used this little plumbing hose. So it's 3/16 of an inch and it was 10 feet long. I got this at Canadian Tire and it was only $8.99. So I took the scissors and I cut it up and I tried to make them as level as possible. It's a little bit hard to make them perfectly level, so sometimes you have to go back in with the scissors and recut it a little bit. But so I'm just trying my best to make them all approximately the same size. I'm not really, I don't really care if they all exactly match, because really when you think about it in a spice rack, you've got all different brands and things would all be different sizes. However, maybe I should have paid more closer attention, but that's okay. It's just for me and I'm pleased to do it. So then after I've got the tubes all cut, then I'm going to be using 3D resin and UV resin. So I've got my little resin mat here, and then I'm going to get out the UV resin, and the whole point is to make a little tiny dot. So you'll see here when I do my first dot I go overboard. So you don't want the dots to be too large, because see, that's way too big. You want them to be about the size of the bottom of the little tube. So I'm just dotting my little mat with a bunch of little dots, and then I'm going to be putting my plumbing hose on top of it. So I'm going to try to do at least 8 or 10 per load, and because I need quite a few of them to make these spice racks. So then I take the little piece of tube and I just stand it up on top of the UV resin. And this is where, you can really tell if some of them are not going to be even. It's better to scrap it than to, and start again than to have them all lopsided. So I've got the UV resin cooking under the little UV light. And these little UV lights can be had super cheap on Amazon. They're really cheap. A lot of people use them to do fingernails. And so this is my spice rack. So now I've got to choose some spices to use. So I've got quite a few to choose from. So you can see here the size of the dot beside my finger. And once again, I'm going to do a second batch of little spice containers. So you can see here I've got a whole bunch of them done and more cooking. It only takes a couple minutes for them to cook under that UV light. So now I'm going to be filling them up with some spices. So I've got out my cinnamon, which is the first one that I'm going to use. And I'm just going to dump it into this little dish. And there you go, I've got it filled full of cinnamon. And then I've got my little cinnamon labels there. So, and then as a cap, I got these little beads from Michael's craft store. They just seem to be the correct size bead to fit into the little tube. And I've got out my tacky glue. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to use a little dab of tacky glue. So I've got the tacky glue in this container here. And I'm just going to put it in to the lid, and I'm going to do it sideways so the holes are on the side, not on the top. But I guess you could do it either way. I personally prefer it this way. And then because that tube is plastic and it's easy to expand, I just push the little bead right into it with the tacky glue. And then I cut out the little labels, and that's what my cinnamon looks like. But I've got quite a few more to do, so because I need 8 different kinds of spices. So I figured, well, if I'm going to do this, I might as well build a little spice rack. So I've got these, they're craft sticks that are 1 inch wide, and I'm just going to cut up and make 4 of them. So this is the saw that I use, and it's actually quite nice saw to get a nice square line. So I'm just going to cut out 4 of these, and this will be the back of my little spice rack. And if you're doing this yourself, I guess it depends on how tall you make your little spice jars. I made mine a little bit taller because my friend Pat suggested, well, if I make them taller, then you'll be able to really see the spice that's inside of it. So you can see here, these are going to be my 4 little spice racks. That's the backs. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to take some sandpaper, and I'm just going to sand the edge off just so that it doesn't look rough after I paint it. So I'm just making sure that they're nice and smooth. And then for the sides of this little spice rack, I'm going to use just regular popsicle sticks, and I think that'll work just like perfect. And then for the shelves themselves, I've got these little coffee stir sticks, which is, I've got, as you can see here, I've got a container of salt just below my little saw set up here, and so I tested it, and this is how big the shelf has to be. So I need to make 2 shelves for each of these little spice racks, and I'm going to be putting 4 spices on each shelf. So you can see here I've glued the little shelves on, and then, well, I might as well do one from scratch. So here's the popsicle stick that I'm going to use on each side. You can see here I'm just kind of measuring it to make sure it's the right height, and I'm just marking it with a pen, and then I'm going to cut it. And after I cut it, I just take a little bit of tacky glue and run it on the edge. You can see here I'm just gluing these together. I kind of gave a little 45-degree angle at the top just to give it a little bit of, I don't know, design, I guess. And want to make sure that it's perfectly level on the bottom, because you might not want to hang it up on the wall. You might want to just sit it on your counter. And then I've got the little coffee stir stick for the first shelf that I'm sticking in here with some tacky glue. And you can see here, I just want to try and make it as level as I possibly can. It's super easy to make these little shelves, and all the supplies can be had at the dollar store. And you can see here, I'm just putting in the second shelf. And once again, I'm just like trying to pay careful attention to make sure that they're nice and level. And then I've got here these brown cocktail sticks or toothpicks. They're the round ones. And I'm just going to put those just on the edge so that the little spice containers won't roll off. It's a little bit fiddly, but once they're glued in, it'll be nice and sturdy. So I don't want to glue these little cocktail sticks too high up, because I don't want to make sure as much of the spice bottle shows, and that it's not going to cover the label, because I want the labels to be able to be read. So, and I'm just gluing that in, and yeah, it's a little bit fiddly, but I think they turn out pretty cute. So, and there you go. I mean, if I was going to do this again, I think I would have made the back of the spice shelf slightly higher, because once the spice bottles are in, you're not going to see much of the top of the back of the spice rack. You'll see what I mean at the end. So I've got these, they're just all glued, and so I'm going to let them sit for a little bit, and as soon as the glue's dried, then I'm going to go ahead and paint them. So I chose to use black paint on these particular ones, but I guess you could stain it or paint it any color you like. I like the idea of doing it in black, and I've sped up the film so you don't have to watch me paint. So after I've got them all painted, I'm going to let them sit for a couple hours to make sure they're good and dry. And then I'm coming back in and I'm doing a little floral design on the top of each one. Now, as you can see, the floral design is quite intricate, but once the little spice bottles are in, you're not even going to see all this hard work. So that's why I said, it's too bad I hadn't thought ahead and maybe made those back so just a little bit higher so you could see a little bit more of that painting. I'm quite pleased with the way that looks. It's got kind of an antique, old-fashioned kind of appeal to it. So I'm just going to let that dry for a couple of hours. And yeah, I think that looks pretty good. You can see the paint is still wet as I'm showing it to you on camera. But yeah, I'm pretty pleased with the way these look. They turned out pretty good. Again, I wished I would have made the top just a little bit taller. Then I'm going to go in with some satin varnish in a couple of hours and varnish them off. So this is kind of what they look like, all done up with the spices in them. But I'll show you what I did to install the spices. So this is actually what the little spice racks look like before I put the little spice jars inside, and I'm quite pleased with that. I think it turned out pretty neat. So I'm adding the little spice jars with museum wax so that if you want to remove them afterwards, of course you can. So, and you can see that's about the height that they turned out. I should have made that top shelf a little lower. So here's my museum wax, and I'm just going to wax these things in. So that's what they look like all finished. And as you can see, that top shelf covers up all that hard work I did on the painting. But that's okay. I guess you could take the top middle two spice containers out and put them on your little counter so you can see. So I've got them all nicely put into the little spice racks. And that's it for today. That was a fun little craft, but boy, did it ever take a long time to do all those little tiny bottles. If you enjoyed today's video and would like to help support my channel, you can do so by buying me a coffee. Just go to www.buymeacoffee.com/Lisa Dobo. I'd like to thank everyone that has gone to buymeacoffee.com and bought me a coffee to help support my channel. It's appreciated more than you know. If you haven't already subscribed to my channel, please consider subscribing. It's free. I'm almost at 2,000 subscribers, and then I'm going to do a giveaway of some of the things that I create here on the channel, especially some of my pottery. Well, thank you very much for watching today. I hope you enjoyed it. And once again, have the best day ever.